reference for that, so I can't really speak on it other than it's amazing.
Hello everyone. I guess I should go ahead and start the video. Got the dry erase board. Topic is, well, first off, episode 11. We're going to do a Q&A. Number one question. When should you walk away from a real estate deal? Asked by Elizabeth Messina, and I've got my little note card here to keep me organized. The basic point of her question is referencing one of my videos I did about doing a bunch of legwork to get a deal to go through. If there's multiple family members involved and kind of getting all that straightened out. She was asking, when should you walk away from something like that? Like basically when is it too complicated to keep going with it? I'm going to broaden that kind of question up a little bit to include some other kind of scenarios, I guess you could say, or just more than just if it's a list of heirs or something like that. I think the first thing you need to do is consider why is it you're even interested in buying the house. I'm breaking that into 3 reasons. You either want to keep it, let's just say house, piece of land, whatever, just a piece of real estate. You want to keep it, you want to rent it, or you want to sell it. So if you want to keep it, it could be a situation like the house next to the one you live in is for sale, and it's normally a rental house, but they want to sell it. And somebody could buy it and move in that you don't like, or some landlord could, slumlord could even buy it and rent it out to some rough situation. Somebody has 10 dogs that are barking all night long, and you're just worried that that could happen. Well, you may have more of an interest in it, and you might jump over more hurdles than somebody who lives across town that just wants it as a rental house may put forward as far as their effort. As far as a rent situation goes, I can kind of break that into different categories. What I just said, you live, this house that you're interested in buying is on the other side of town, and it's just one of 1,000 houses you could potentially buy. So why are you going to go kill yourself over that deal versus just getting a different one? Because it's a random location. There's nothing other than it's there and it's available. Another situation, though, that's common is a person will buy a house on one street. Then, because they're in that area, they end up buying another house down the street. Then a third. Then a fourth. All of a sudden, one pops up that might be kind of a lot of work to get it. And you may want to put in more effort because you want to start trying to get more of your stuff in one area just because it makes certain things simpler. So when it comes to selling a house, say it's a house, it's a heck of a lot of work to get it done, but there is a lot of profit potential in there. So you may basically do about anything to get that house, get that deal to go through. So that's something else to consider. Basically, say it's a $50,000 house that could sell for maybe $80,000, $85,000 once it's renovated, but it takes $25,000 to get it, together. The numbers really just aren't there on a deal like that, in my opinion, if it's something you're just going to be selling. So that is something to kind of keep in mind throughout this video, that each one of the things that I'm saying will apply differently, but I'll kind of touch on those. First, let's go over price. I think price is one of the things that, of course, you would walk away from a deal on. In the case of keeping the house, how much is it worth for you to not have dogs barking all night long next to your house that you've lived in your whole life that you never want to leave? So you may pay, whatever it takes, basically. Say you're going to rent a house. I think this could go kind of all different ways. If it's a house all the way across town, and $700 is how much the house rents for. And of course, again, there's all kinds of other houses that you could just get. You might not do, but so much. But let's say the house is a really good place, and regardless of how much the rent is, it's just a place that's going to have high demand rent, maybe people who will stay longer. It's just a nice piece of real estate that you might want to rent out in the meantime while you hold it for a long time. So let's just say you're paying $5,000, $10,000, $20,000, however much dollars more than you think it should be sold for. You're going to keep it so long, some of those things really might not matter. You're going to recoup it in rent. There's just all different kind of ways. Looking down the road, kind of keeping in mind what your goal is going to kind of, I think, put that in perspective that things are too much. In the case of my $12,000 house, I have people say, you paid way too much money. Well, I paid $12,000 for it and put about $15,000 in the house. So I've got about $30,000 tied up into what is now basically functionally a brand new house. So how much less do you kind of expect? let's just say it's the $12,000 that they're having a hard time with, $10,000 or $4,000 less. If the house is renting for $600, in the end I'm netting 400 something, so I think it's close to $5,000 is roughly is what I end up profiting on that house. So very quickly, the fact that you may pay too much doesn't really matter. You end up making that money back, and then of course the house is appreciating. In my case, that $30,000 total investment into that house is right off the bat worth $60,000 to $70,000 if I was to sell that house. So I'm making money just in the fact that I kind of did that work and what somebody would potentially buy it for. So something to consider as well. With renting, you're recouping your money. Now when it comes to selling a house, you're kind of getting into more fixed numbers. If it's a flip, basically, where you buy it, renovate it, sell it, all kind of in a short amount of time, you got to factor in a lot of stuff. If it is too much, there just might not be enough profit in there. You need to consider, what is it that I'm going to go through, and let's say you come out, it looks like the profit is worth $15,000. We'll just pick a number. Think about how much time you're putting into it, and if you didn't technically pay yourself back out of doing that, the $15,000 is how much you're going to get paid to do from start to finish, and is that enough money? So that's one thing that I would consider. Next thing, condition. So the actual physical condition of the house. In my case, I buy really rough houses, and some of them are even condemned. So in the case of a condemned house, or a house that just needs a really, really, really big renovation, there is a percentage of that house that you have to keep to consider it a renovation versus a rebuild. I can't remember what that percentage is, but there's a number, and you can talk to your building department about that. I want to say it was like 10 or 12%, which you're down to the foundation, like a portion of the foundation in that situation. And I asked a fellow one time on a house that was super rough, I said, how far will y'all let me go with rebuilding a house? And he said, basically, you can rebuild the whole thing. You just have to keep a small amount of the existing house, which in his case, I think he said was at least part of the foundation and like part of one wall. I can't remember exactly what it was, but you can find out kind of what that is for your area. So with its condition, you kind of have to bring it in. What's its price? How much is it going to cost to renovate it? And what am I going to do with it? In my case, what excites me the most about when I'm buying, I think, real estate is its location, or really it's how easy is it to get it, especially with having my YouTube channel and having the ability to post these videos and do a big renovation. It doesn't faze me as much maybe as if I was just doing this and the camera had nothing to do with it. But again, the $12,000 house that I did, some of the people in the comments will say, well, that house was in a trailer park. Who would want to live there? Well, it's a street full of people. People want to live there. And it wasn't actually in a trailer park. It's just on a street with some trailers and a few houses. But it is in a excellent place as far as rental goes. It was easy to get into it, which I think that's the barrier to entry is really low. In the case of that house, it was $12,000 to buy that house, including all the closing. From there, a man or woman can take as much time as they need to get that house renovated. And that's what I like about renovations. I get people ask me, why don't I just build houses? Or why don't I just buy better houses? With a renovation, it's kind of like layaway is the way I've kind of thought about it, or financing without interest. I can get in there, and for $12,000, you save up your money as long as it takes. Then you find the cheapest house in your area that you can find that's in an acceptable area. And then you just basically renovate it as you can afford it with cash. And if you do that, and you pick a okay place that'll have some rental demand, you can't mess up, because you're never kind of overextending yourself, because you're basically fix it at the pace that you can fix. So with its condition, I'm kind of factoring in that stuff. Now, say you were somebody a whole lot further along than a beginner, and you've got enough money to buy places and pay people to work on them, or just buy places ready to rent. Well, you may not want to go all the way back to that. That may be a situation that is just kind of beneath you at that point, but you're probably not the one watching this video if that's the case. Condition as far as selling it, again, it's going to come back into how much is your total investment going to be. And the other thing to mention too, in its condition, with the $12,000 house, I did the video series, and that made me go, I think, further than I probably would have gone if I did not have a YouTube channel. Meaning that I might have not fixed it up as much as I did. It still would have been a solid place, but also the time that's invested in making these videos really slowed it down. That project took me 1 year, 8 months pretty much, and then it rented instantly, so about 1 year and 8 months total. Each month that goes by is lost rent. In the case of that house, it's rents for $600, so 600 times however much that is. What is that, 20 months? So 20 times 6, $12,000. Am I saying that right? Roughly, yeah. Y'all do the math if I'm wrong. That's how much I lost to rent. Now, of course, there's no way you can buy a house that rough and have it rented the next month, but the longer you take, there's lost money. So you can think of it as you're saving money by doing it yourself, but if you make it take 6 months longer, it's 6 times whatever the rent is. So if you could have paid somebody the same amount or less than that money, that difference, I guess, you could have had the house rented sooner and be making money. So you can kind of think that you're saving money sometimes when it's actually costing you money. But in the end, the money has to be there to spend it. So if you just don't have the money, you don't have the money. You can't speed the process up any more than you can speed it up. I think that's pretty much it. Now we're kind of talking more about what her question was really about. A hard closing. So some of the closings that I do are a little tricky. In the end, it's not that they're really hard. It's just that there's just more steps involved in it. In the case of the house I did, it was dealing with maybe 4 individuals, but they had all passed away except the one. But they're still kind of considered in this whole thing because of potential other family members that they could have that could have got their portion of that house, that kind of their interest in it. And so in that case, of course, I followed through. I really wanted the house. It's just right down the street from me. It's a great house. I kind of want to probably end up living in it myself maybe at some point. I probably would move from this house to that one, and then from that one out of that one probably 2 years later, so if I ended up selling it, or I may end up keeping it long term. Now, if a house, there's another house that I would like to buy, but it has probably 30 or 40 people involved in it. Some are dead, some are have issues that would make them very difficult to deal with. Everyone always thinks everything is made of gold at the time that they think they can get $20 out of it. So with that house, I've never really even put much effort into it because I know it's just going to turn into a huge thing. So I'm just going to kind of, as much as I hate even admitting this, just kind of wait for something to shake loose and something different to happen. And then I'll take my best swing at it at that point. But I think if I just went at it, I'd probably get shot down pretty quick. And I'm pretty not intimidated by situations. But this is one I just think that it's kind of a lost cause. So, it's hard to kind of put an exact answer to what Elizabeth is asking, but I think it all kind of goes back into the same thing. If it's a really hard closing, and you could just go, say it's the house next to you, and you really want to own it, you may do just about anything until somebody finally slaps you and says no. But if it's just a random house across town that you're just trying to acquire, there's no reason to do that. You just go get a different one, because what you're really trying to do is you're trying to acquire as much as possible, not kill yourself over trying to just get a hold of one. A slow deal. So you've got a deal that you know it's going to go through, but it's just going to take forever. And most likely that has something to do with some sort of a legal issue where there's all kinds of forms that have to keep getting filed, and each one you file, you have to wait 90 days for somebody to reply to stuff. That can get really annoying. Very painful, because oftentimes, something will happen like you'll file a form, wait 90 days to get some response from somebody, and then find out there was like one thing wrong, or there's this other form you could have filed already and you got to file that again and wait another 90 days. There's just weird stuff like that happens in real estate. But it could also be due to the person you're buying a house from. One house that I purchased, I was dealing with an owner that required a lot of chit-chatting on the phone, most of the deals that I end up buying, they're totally over the phone. I actually never meet the people because a lot of them live out of town. They just inherited something, but they live out of town. So in that case, I did a lot of talking. I probably talked. There were some times when I ended up talking to this woman, and I would speak to her for maybe 30 seconds to a minute about the actual deal, but I may end up on the phone with her for about an hour just kind of talking about whatever. So things like that end up happening a lot of times when you're kind of doing non-traditional real estate deals, where it's almost like you really get to know somebody, and a deal could take several months to actually pull it off, and you spend a lot of time doing things like that, talking to people. And it can just end up being really nitpicky as far as just making the closing get through, like some of the stories that I've talked about, where you just, each thing you do moves you this much further towards the closing, just a teeny amount, but it's like a massive amount of effort. So there's things like that. And again, that comes back to how bad do you want it? How good of a deal is it? How much money are you going to make off of it? And if it, again, is that house across the town? Why do you want to take several months to buy this house when you could maybe buy the one next to it in a week? Because cash closing takes about a week to pull off if there's no hitches at all. They can go even faster than that if everything aligns right, but on my average, about a week to a week and a half, and the slowest deals that I've ever done can take about a month. But like, as far as negotiating the whole thing out, convincing somebody to sell something, figuring out the price, figuring out all the details, and then doing the closing, I've had them take a really long time. I had one from the first time about a year. I've had them take about a year from the first time I started trying to buy a house till I finally got the person to say yes, and then actually closed it. Probably over a year. But like one that just really gets going and moves consistently out through till closing, that still takes a long time. It can be a couple of months in tricky situations. But that's how you get stuff cheap. It's not, you don't just walk down the road and see for sale signs, there's no problems, $2,000 houses. I mean, it's always a lot of hurdles to jump over. So I think that is sort of a quick rundown of how I would answer this question. Let me get back in my comments section and pick another question. Well, we're back. The next question is a three-parter. This is asked by TW, a bearded gentleman with glasses here on YouTube. He's asked a few questions, and I believe I answered him. But I'll basically answer y'all and answer him again. First question, how do you set a renovation budget? Well, I don't really. I kind of factor things in when I'm making my mind up of whether or not I want to buy a certain house. But a lot of times, for me at least, it's a lot more of a gut thing. And basically, that question and then this question down here at the bottom, for me, I don't really super plan stuff out because the stuff is such a no-brainer. For me, it's all about the price of how much I buy it for and the price that it's running for. When in the end of a deal, you're going to have 30 grand or 20 grand or 40 or whatever it is, sort of that lower price range to have basically a new house that you're then going to turn and rent for $600, $700, $800, $900, whatever it is. It just makes sense when you don't even have to do the math. It just makes sense. Especially, it just makes sense. I don't need to over-explain it more than that. So I don't really kind of set a budget. I might be kind of misunderstanding the question a little bit, but I'll try to answer it exactly how I kind of think that it is being asked. Let's say I look at a house, and the house is $10,000 to buy it, and I don't think that I should have more than $20,000 in it when I'm done. I think doing something like that is kind of setting yourself up for potential disappointment. I think that you should think of it as a window that you're going to spend about this much, because usually, and I'm sure everybody has experienced this in many areas in your life, you have an issue and you need to fix it. Well, you start trying to fix that problem that you're working on, and then that kind of digs up another problem, and you got to fix that one, and then that one can kind of cause some issues. It's kind of like when your sink's broke and all of a sudden you're digging up your sewer line in the yard. Things kind of progress that way sometimes. So in my case, I guess the best way I can answer this is that I have enough experience from doing renovations to just look at a house and go, okay, the roof needs to be redone. It's about 10 squares. I'll tear the shingles off and put the black paper down, and then I'll pay the roofer to nail shingles down for $50 a square. I'll buy the shingles. So, $500 plus $1,500 or $1,000 worth of shingles. I'm going to have 3 or 4 rolls of black paper. Whatever it is, I can kind of wrap my head around that. Needs a new heat pump. I'll call the fellas. They'll come over and install one for $3,500. So I kind of just get this rough idea of what the total cost is going to be. There really isn't a budget. I don't think of it as far as I can spend X amount per month. It kind of goes back to the last question. I want to get into the deal. If I see that it's the end result is good, I just want to get the deal. And if it's easy enough, I go after it. And then easy by the price, the barrier for me to get it is, I can swallow it. And then from there, I renovate it as I can afford it. That could change because maybe halfway through that renovation, I find another house that I want, and that wipes me out, wipes out all my money. Or if I have some sort of a family situation, or maybe I can't work on the house as much, so I just can't get the job done as fast. Whatever the case is, basically I just do what I can. I do the best I can, and but if you just stay consistent on stuff, that's what matters the most. So basically, I don't have a good question for this other than say I don't really budget for it outside of just having experience, knowing roughly what things are going to cost. And what things are going to cost are pretty easy. Just call people and ask them. If the house is 1,000 square feet, you look at the flooring in the store, it's $2 a square foot. You got $2,000 worth of flooring. You need underlayment for that flooring. Well, how much is that? It's 20 cents per square foot or whatever it is. And you can just kind of figure it up. And then, depending on what it is you're doing with the house, renting it or selling it or keeping it, whatever, you just look at the numbers, and if the numbers make sense, you do it. If they don't, you don't do it. But a lot of that's going to depend on kind of, your reasons for doing so. So I think that answers that first part. Next question, do you use cash or credit? Well, I think I'm clearly more of a cash man, but I have used some evil credit before. For those of you who follow Homemade Home, the Brick Ranch house, I bought that house with a mortgage. That's why in my first video I said it funny. I said I got a mortgage. I was just being goofy because it's like completely different from me. Now, why did I do that? Why did I do something that I basically lean away from? Because it was way more than I have cash. Way, way, way more. And then also, it was a special situation. It was old family land across the road from land that's currently in my family. Long-term thinking. The fact that I could buy it and then get it rented, and then at least the rent's covered. Now, of course, all the down payment and all that stuff, it wasn't. So that was my extent to using credit on a big level. And then on a smaller level, do I use credit? I think it was this past year. I was in Lowe's, and I was buying a dishwasher, an oven, and a refrigerator all at once. Each one of those was roughly $500 each or something like that. Not quite, but if you average it out, that's probably what they would have been. It was between $1,200 and $1,500. I can't remember exactly, but that's about what it was. When I get up to the cash register, she asked me if I had a Lowe's credit card. I said nope. I said nope, like I would never do that. And she said, well, if the first time you get it, you save 10% right off the bat, and after that, all your purchases are 5% off. So she drew my attention in. I ended up signing up for it, and I got one. I got a Lowe's credit card, and right about that time was when I kind of first ever in my life, and again, this is just last year, gave a hoot about my credit score. So I was kind of like, well, that would kind of make that better probably. I ended up actually having a higher credit score. I didn't even know that because I had never looked into it. But I knew that I kind of wanted to establish some credit. You can have a high credit score, but there's other factors that go into getting loans and all that kind of stuff if that's something you ever want to do. If you don't have a lot of credit history, just because you've got one dinky little credit card that you pay off and use just the right amount of it, that doesn't mean you're going to get approved for anything. You go, you got to have the income, and they want to see that you've, paid off some big stuff, not just paid off your $20 of groceries every 2 weeks or whatever it is you're doing. So I have a Lowe's credit card. That Lowe's credit card has like a, at this point, it kind of goes up every once in a while. It's got about a $6,300 limit. Now, do I go spend money on that card I don't have? No, sir or ma'am. I don't do that. Basically, I use the credit card just to get the 5% off, and then I just pay it off, later that day or the next day or something like that. It basically just stays paid off at all times. The other thing I like about it is it organizes all of my spending. All the money I spend on houses basically goes through Lowe's, and it goes through that credit card, so it kind of, whether I can know where the receipt is or not, it's all in that account. All the spending, I can get it later for tax purposes. I think that's probably pretty much it. As far as the Lowe's credit card, this is not a commercial for Lowe's credit cards, but they also do offer 6-month no financing. And every once in a while they run a promotion where it's like a year or something. But I think that comes back to you're buying it for the normal price, but you're just kind of stretching out paying for it. But I'm not buying anything that I don't have the money for, so I take the 5% off. Basically, when I'm walking through Lowe's, I'm not paying taxes. Sales tax, because sales tax is roughly 5%, I guess. So I just kind of, it's just a little fun plus that what I stick in the basket, that's how much I'm going to pay for it, not that little gotcha right there at the end when they tell you the price and it's higher than it should be. My thoughts on using credit for doing houses. Now we're talking getting like renovation loans and all that. I'm probably not the best one to really even ask about this kind of thing because I think I've been pretty against using credit for stuff. I like the safety of just working in cash. I think that it's only been a fairly small time in history where so many people can use this type of money. And so for me, I don't want to say it's a traditional thing or an old school thing, but it's just, I can wrap my head around it. I almost just basically feel like if I can't afford it, I shouldn't have it. I have no business doing it. With that said, I've done the things I've just told you about. I did buy that house, but it was kind of complicated in my mind. It involved other people's wishes and all that kind of stuff, and I was the one that could kind of do it, wanted to do it and all that, so I did it. Lastly, on old TW's question, what percentage of rent is reinvested? He said how much of it goes back into real estate deals, basically, but that would be reinvesting it. The way my finances work with my wife and I is currently I am the only one working. I am a sugar daddy, and then she is at home with the family, being a mother, so she works much harder than me. With that said, so my income is paying all of the household costs, so going to the grocery store, the electric, the water bill, the expensive memory card I just bought for this camera, just any kind of little expenses that we just have. All of that is, everything's paid for by me. I mean, all the taxes on all my houses, the insurance, so all of my money from rental, from YouTube, from my ebooks, selling tables, regardless, I'm overstating all this. I pay for all that basically first. I don't know if it's first or second. It's just constantly, you're paying for stuff all day long. I don't know what is first or second. But after all of my just cost of living stuff, pretty much all my money is available for going back into my investing and back into rental houses, whether that be a renovation or buying another house. Now, that doesn't mean that every month I get X amount of money available to me after my spending and I can just immediately pop it over into some house. The way I'm doing stuff right now, this kind of goes back into what I said about using credit in a way. I didn't really touch on that, I guess. But is that I'm doing everything on my own. And I do it all on my own because I started out having to do it that way. And then what's happened to me now is I've kind of surpassed where I have to absolutely need to do it. It's still like certain parts of it are still a great idea. And of course, it gives me the opportunity to have these videos. I mean, the renovation videos. But at this point, it's almost kind of hurting me because I'm able to save my money faster than I use it up on my renovations. So I could just take more of that money, speed up that renovation, get to where this house down the street, the one I'm working on now, it'll be running for probably $750 or so. I could have that running sooner. and then I'll be making that income, and then on to the next one. But instead, I've got this thing in my head, old school thinking from when I was getting started, that I just need to do as much as possible. But now I'm doing it out of habit, not out of necessity. So in my case, I should be reinvesting my money sooner. At the same time, with the way I'm doing stuff, and I do kind of like this part of it, I'm not spending all my money that I've saved. I'm not spending all my money as I go. So I'm able to continue doing my renovations, and then the amount that I'm saving gets bigger. And then usually what happens is, it's just somehow it happens, about when I'm done renovating a house is usually when I find another house. But since I haven't just constantly forked over all my money, I have that money available to act when something pops up. I think once I get a little further down the road, I'll be making enough money to where that won't even be a worry of mine, to where I'll be making enough money to where I can renovate houses much faster, pay people to do work, and saving some at the same time. And then recently I've been kind of opening my mind to borrowed money a little bit. And when I say borrowed, I don't mean walking up into a bank, but using individuals' money. As I've done better, people have started approaching me wanting to get in on the action. And what that means is they want to give me their money to do stuff with, and I basically just pay them some interest. And I'm kind of open to that idea now, especially if it's like it's somebody I know, but like somebody I know in the right way, not, borrowing it from, I don't know, somebody that you just don't want that kind of relationship with. But I'm open to that idea of doing that. So this answer can kind of be different to different people. Some people, like my rich dad, poor dad that's sitting over here, Robert Kiyosaki basically just says don't use your own money to do anything. He said just borrow money, go into debt, and then keep your own money. Then you've got somebody like Dave Ramsey that says, pay off all your debt before you do any kind of, real estate type investing, rental houses, and then pay cash. Don't go in the hole on stuff like that. So two very, very different schools of thought. And I think the right answer is somewhere in there. I don't think it's really to either extreme for me. Now, there's certain people that if you handed them any kind of access to credit, you might as well, introduce them to hard drugs, because they're going to go nuts. They can't handle themselves on any level. So for them to do something like what I'm doing, they may have to just stick to cash and just say no to any kind of debt at all. There's all different kinds of situations, and I can't answer it for all of them. But what percentage of my money is reinvested? After my expenses, pretty much all of it. There's very little spending in an entire month. I don't know how much frivolous spending that I do. Maybe probably $20 to $100 at most on average. And then there's like this rare occasion where I'll just do something that I want to do, buy something. And for me, buying something that I really want, that's expensive, that has nothing to do with anything, could maybe cost $500 or $600. But that is very rare. That may be once a year or once every couple of years that I do something like that. But what it comes down to is all the things that I do that make money, I like doing them. So the things that I buy that support that are actually like business expenses, I get my jollies out of that. And then I'm also getting my jollies out of kind of the ideas behind what I'm doing. I don't need to buy, a bunch of stuff. The lens on this camera costs $245. That really, I had a lot of fun buying that. It is a 10 to 18 millimeters, so that was as wide as my old lens got. And then this one gets that wide. This makes my videos better. When I'm working in a house, I get a nice wide shot, so I'm interested in all the stuff that's sitting on this tripod. And so I get my kicks out of that, but this directly influences my money making. In my opinion, it makes me more money because it'll make my videos better, more watchable, and so on. And again, stuff like this is a business expense. So in the end, it's just not that big of a deal versus if I was just going to a store and buying Hot Wheels cars because I like them. Hundreds of Hot Wheels cars. But that's this question, this series of questions asked by TW. I hope that was semi-entertaining. I probably stretched those out too long. What are we at? 17 minutes. We'll do one more question or set of questions. So let me look again, and I'll be right back. The next question comes from Matthew Haughey, Haughee. I don't know how to say that one. How do you say that, Matthew? He had lots of questions, and one, I'm going to do these quick as I can, which means it'll get drawn out. Useful skills versus contracting work. His question is, could I just go over those things? Like, what are useful skills to have versus basically which ones are better just to hire out? My answer to that, of course, is going to shift over time. It has shifted since I started. Again, starting with basically knowing nothing, but then learning how to do everything because I had to, doing everything on my own for years, and then only getting someone involved if I absolutely had to. In the early days, that was electricity, and then kind of ongoing, that is HVAC work, meaning like installing units, maintenance on them. For as much as it costs, I just don't want to even do it. For having a new system installed, never mind, I won't get into that. My answer, for me, kind of thinking about getting started and even going forward, I like to know how to do pretty much everything. Even if I was getting someone else to do the work, I want to have an understanding of what I'm paying someone to do. Because there's a lot of good people out there and there's a lot of bad people out there. So I want to be able to look at something and have a general idea. But that is not necessary. You can avoid that worry by getting references and calling up someone else, say, hey, who do you use to do roofs? Who do you use to do your HVAC? Who do you use as a plumber? And if somebody's got a great track record, I'm not going to be scared of them. I'll just hire them and get them to tell you what the price is going to be and all that kind of stuff. But again, for me, I like knowing what I'm doing, how to do all the stuff that needs to be done. Because sometimes things need to be fixed quick. Like, say it's a plumbing issue or an electrical issue or a roof problem. If I get some phone call in the middle of the night as a landlord, and of course I want to avoid this by using a property manager, but they may send someone out there to deal with it, and then I may get a heavy cost. Versus, I had a perfect situation. It's just not too long ago. I think I've already mentioned it in the video. I got a call from the property manager. There was a plumbing problem. They described it and sent me a picture that the tenant had sent them, and it was just a little leaky pipe. If I would have sent a plumber there, it would have probably cost hundreds of dollars because they would have had to drive all the way to the house, figure it out, and fix the problem. And I wouldn't be surprised if it cost, $150, $200 or more dollars to have that issue fixed. I fixed it for $20. No, it was probably about maybe 10. $10 to $15 is how much I fixed it. It was just some little weeping copper lines, and I went in there and cut it out and put 2 shark bite fittings in and a piece of PEX between it. Problem solved. A plumber may have come in, and even if he did what I did, it would have been a lot more than what I spent just for his time going there and back. So for all the repair work, problem solving, and all that, I love having useful skills. So I say get experience in whatever you can. And again, that whole question is going to depend on where you're at in things. I hope to, in the future, basically do none of the work myself. That is maybe a painful thing for people to hear as far as the YouTube channel goes, but, who knows how long YouTube's going to be around. And then also, it's just, I'm doing all of this type of work to develop a certain type of income, passive income, to where I don't have to do certain things. I want to live my life, not work to live, if that makes sense. I'm not sure. So that's over. Got that one out of the way. Having DI work inspected, and how much does it cost to have that inspected? Are there fees? So this answer varies depending on where you live, and the easiest way to get the answer for this is to call the department that handles building permits within your city or county. And then this isn't even possible in certain places in the world. A lot of our European friends and viewers on Homemade Home are constantly telling me that you can't do this type of work where they live. So in some places you just can't do certain types of work. Where I'm at, in many other places, you are allowed, as the person who owns the house, you're allowed to do all of the work. You just still have to have all of it inspected if it is work that involves a building permit and you go through the process of actually getting the permit. So a lot of people ask this question, and they're asking an honest question. There's plenty of people who do everything you can do pretty much working on a house and never actually get a building permit. A lot of people are just kind of scared of the process for multiple reasons, but I found that getting a building permit in the end is not as big of a deal as I thought it was. So and then as far as having this work inspected, your DIY work, if you're in an area where you're allowed to do it yourself and you've been honest, you've got it, your fees are the fee of the building permit, and that's going to vary depending on where you're at. When I get a building permit in the area where I'm sitting right now, it is like around $50 normally. And then the county nearby where I get the permits, the same kind of a permit can be like $150 or $200. I don't even know why, but they just have a different way of going about it. Now, in the end, it's negligible, that difference, but you kind of get an idea. It's just however much your building permit cost that's going to include all of the inspections. And how inspections basically work is if you've got a house and you make a bunch of changes to the framing, the plumbing, the electric, whatever it is, your first inspection is called a rough-in. You've got all your wires are just pulled through all the holes. Your framing is kind of just rough. It's not rough work, but I'm just saying it's all of it's still exposed, basically. You've got your work boxes, the blue boxes the electric runs into. The wire's just coming out and hanging out about that far. Plumbing's dangling out of the walls. They just need to see it all and know that it was all roughed in properly. Then they approve you for insulation and then drywall, and then they come back in for the final. And then if there's any issues in between those, they mark it. They tell you, you need to fix this before we go on to the next step. And then sometimes if you get a nice inspector, he'll say, look, you need to fix that, but I'm going to let you go ahead and get your insulation in. But fix that and I'll check it next time. To where he doesn't have to come back out, check this one thing, and then say, go ahead and put your drywall up or put your insulation up, whatever step you're at. So that's that. This is an easy question to ask. You don't need to think you need to be sneaky. Just call up your building department and say, hey, I'm looking into investing in some properties. I want to familiarize myself with the process. How do y'all price out building permits? What's the schedule of inspections? I want to buy the house. I'm going to work on it myself. Am I allowed to do that? You can just ask these questions and see what they say. With your building, the building department, they even do things where they will come out to your job site and give you advice. You cannot abuse this process, but if you've got a situation, this pops up with renovations, where you're doing something major, there's no way of getting around it, they're going to see it, they're going to go, what did you do here? But that thing you're doing is not going to be able to be done and be done exactly to code as if it was a new house. So with renovations, you're grandfathered into certain things. Like you can have some wire that's ran that looks a little crazy, and if you leave it, you're grandfathered into it. But if you replace it and you replace it the same way, but it's a nice new wire, he go, did you just put that wire in? And it's as simple as just saying no. He go, okay. But if you say yes, he'll say, well, you can't do it that way. You've got to do this. And I've been caught by that kind of stuff. Even though you replaced it the same way, it'll be functional, but it might be a wire running in an area. He says, that's too exposed. You need to run that through conduit. But if you would have left it, you're fine because it's grandfathered in. So you can have those people come out. My whole point of that was you can have the people come out and they will say, you know what, I see what you're doing here. If you double up that 2x12 and add some hangers here and put some blocking in right there, it'll be good enough for us. And so that may have not been exactly to code, but you've overcompensated in some way, and this may not be the way it is in every area, but the building officials do have some level of discretion depending on their mood and who they are. Another reason to always be nice to them. Don't give them too much crap, because regardless of whether you like what they say or not, it's just probably the way it's going to have to be. Building departments get audited, and audited for them means that whoever it is that's auditing that department can sometimes go out and check stuff, and they can see that they've passed something that shouldn't have been passed. So they have people to answer to as well. It's not just you have to answer to them, and it's just arbitrary rules. And even if it is arbitrary, because I've certainly been got the fail on permits before, where I was just like, this does not matter at all. Why are you going to make me do this? And it can be something that takes you so long to fix, and it's just like, it makes about as much difference as if something was just a different color. I mean, it just doesn't matter. But yeah, you can ask all those questions. Using unlicensed contractors. Basically, is this bad? If you're going to use an unlicensed contractor, and you want to do it the sneakiest way you can to get by it, what people do is they say they're going to do the work themselves. They get the unlicensed, handyman, whoever it is, to come do the work. Then it just gets inspected. In the end, it gets inspected. Technically, you've done something wrong. I'm not saying to do it or not do it, but that's how some people get around that. If it's work that doesn't really even need a permit, is using an unlicensed contractor. Unlicensed contractor is just a fancy word for a guy who knows how to do some stuff. That's just, basically a handyman that come to your house. He'll build your deck. He'll build you a garage. He can put in some lights in your ceiling, whatever it is, replace your toilet. The way I look at it is there's nothing wrong with doing it. But if you use an unlicensed contractor and your house burns down later, and then the fire marshal's there and you got your insurances all mixed up in it, and they find out you went and did something you weren't supposed to do, and that's the cause of the fire, there's some different people who could be in trouble in that situation. You might not get you might not get any money for your house burning down or whatever happened. There's consequences to everything. You just have to kind of weigh that out and see if it's worth it. The way I look at it, if I was doing something and I had a permit myself and I needed somebody to come in and just help me out with something, I personally feel like, I'm not saying this is what I do, what I advise, or anything like that. That's my, never mind. I don't see anything wrong with it if you know the person does good work and all that kind of stuff. Not everything requires a permit, but most things do. Last question by Matthew. What if you buy a house and then find out later that it needs to be demolished? I almost didn't answer that one just because I thought it was funny. But I don't want to laugh at somebody's question. I'm laughing at it because it's just in my situation. It's just not something I would find out. I wouldn't be that caught off guard that that I buy a house that needs to be demolished. And so I think this question just kind of comes from a fear-based, kind of a beginner-type thing. If you buy something that you find out needs to be demolished, you've messed up. And if it has to be demolished, it has to be demolished. You just got to pay for it. Or, I don't know, it's just as simple as that. It's just you got yourself into a pickle. But you can avoid this, and that's the reason I'm really answering this question, is that through a little bit of knowledge, you'll be able to know whether or not it was a good purchase or not. If you don't know, I think early on, if you're a person who doesn't have just sort of that common sense in a certain area, you need to bring in somebody that does. Find somebody else that has experience in renovating houses, or pay a house inspector to come in and look something over for you. And they'll say, this needs to be done, that needs to be done. That's their job. They're an expert. Plenty of experience. And then something like that wouldn't happen. Other than that, I just don't know how that would happen. So again, that's coming from a place of fear and worry. And so you just take the right steps to avoid stuff like that. And that could be, paying too much for houses and all that kind of stuff. It's just, you just need the knowledge in an area. Most of that comes with experience. So if you don't have experience, find somebody that does. This brings us to the end of the video. I hope this kind of a thing is fun. I had fun doing this video, doing a Q&A. So that was 3 different people. Who was that? Elizabeth, TW, and Matthew Hoghe. If that's how you say his name. I highly doubt that's how you say it. I guess that's it. Check the description if you're interested in buying cheap houses. I have my ebook that I've mentioned multiple times. A short read, about 45 minutes to an hour, but it is, I think, the best answers for anyone looking to get into this, of how to seek out cheap houses. Are the houses going to be as cheap as mine? Some could be cheaper. Some will be way more expensive, but a deal's a deal, and how you find a deal really is the same regardless of where you're at, in my opinion. Does it have every single crazy way in the world you could go about finding a inexpensive house, a great deal in your area? I'm sure it does not. It is just applies to the houses that I've bought. And then, of course, if you continue to watch these videos in Homemade Home, I'll talk more about that kind of stuff later. These videos here on this channel, I'm figuring out how to kind of get them set up as a podcast, taking the audio from these videos, currently uploading them onto Sellfy, where I sell my ebooks, and then they're available as a purchase, or you can listen all day long here for free on YouTube. I think that's pretty much it. I won't go on any further. If there's any other things that I want you to see, I'll just have them in the links below or do some posting in the comments. But one thing I want to encourage you all to do that I'm not getting as much in the past few videos, I think it's because I've been jokey and then people have focused on those, but is give me your ideas for videos. And then I think on occasion, I want to break down lots of little questions like I did in this video, but I also want to focus on big topics in longer videos. So thank you all for watching. Again, I don't want to say shocked, but I am extremely pleased with the viewership of these videos so far. The amount of views and all that is nothing compared to the other channels, but the fact that people are sitting through videos this long, engaging this much, I think it is so cool and interesting. This is my sort of YouTube focus right now as far as where my interest lies. I'm going to keep on keeping on with the renovation videos, but I'm having a lot of fun doing these. I think it's just laid back feeling for me. When I do this, I'm doing this. When I'm doing the renovations, videos slow me down, but of course, it's something I enjoy in its own way. It's kind of like doing a triathlon or something. It's not easy. It is hard work, but it's still satisfying in the end. This stuff, I'm just having fun. I feel like I'm talking to y'all, and with the questions you're asking me, the comments, I feel like it's enough of a back and forth to where we got something going on. So thanks for that. I'll see you next time.